So what's up, everybody? Yeah, I've finally, now I'm capable of putting a video together, which is absolutely insanity. We went through, and I'm going to share a little bit about my own life here a little bit, so you guys can get a picture of what the heck was going on, you know, why I sort of took a break, and now I'm back. And we did a lot of different things outside the studio. I was helping a whole entire band put together a really big show. I've been helping a gentleman with his Pro Tools system, and I was doing one-on-one courses. So he's a great guy. I mean, has treated me with nothing but respect. I mean, it's one of those things where he's a great person. With that being said, I've also been working out of another studio. It's a great time to talk about, you know, the business of audio. I think if you want to make this a living for yourself, you do have to stay active. I make it an effort to go out and watch artists that are, you know, that are close to me, or close to my area. So if you did work for me, there was a gentleman that said something to me. I was really busy this week that I did his record, and I want him to know, if he's watching, that he said, if you care, you know, and that sort of bugged me. Like he said, here's my album, if you care. I care more than you know. Okay, I do. I care more than you know, because when I'm a part of something, I want to see it successful for you. I want to see artists make money. I want to see artists, you know, able to go to the next level and you know, continue to make great music. Whether you're on what they would classify in the limelight, or you're just in the same sense, to me, what's as important is making a commitment to make a living with music. There's a lot of musicians that I know, this is the side of it you don't see. So if you're an artist that just got into this, there's a side of artists that I know that make a great living, and you may never know who they are. So, you know, if you're going to make the commitment to make a living, it's a good goal. You know, I think it's a lot easier to make a goal of, from coaching baseball too. I coach baseball. There's a mastery attitude, and I actually read this was a sports psychologist, and it was alongside the Chicago Bulls with Phil Jackson, and there's two types of mentalities. And you look at these two mentalities, and I realize how prominent they are in the mixing world, in the artistic world, in what we do. Because the fact is this, is if you get really good at this, and you know, by the grace of God, get your name out there. And what I mean by that is, if you have to take on that burden, I think to some of these bigger artists, that sense of fame can become a curse. I mean, like, you know, you can't walk down the street, you can't do this, you can't do that. So they may give you a different perspective on that. Where the joy that you have when you first started in the studio is a totally different story. You know what I mean? So you're in the studio, and you're like, man, we're just having fun, we're enjoying ourselves. So there is a battle. I think there's an inner battle. And what you get to when you get to a professional level, you know, not only in the sports arena, but in the music arena, is you can have demand, whether it's from people that are in control of the finances or whatever. You can have demand on yourself to make it about money. You could have a family right now that's making it, you got to pay the rent, you got to pay the bills, you got to do this, and that has been the battle for artists since the beginning of time. You're doing everything in your power, so don't ever think that a person like myself doesn't get it. Okay, I get it. You're trying everything you can in your life to make something work, and you know, you have people that are downloading your music, not supporting you, making you miserable, and it's very easy to gain a bitter attitude towards everybody. And when it comes to like professional mixing or things like that, you're just like, I don't care. You know, this is just a mixtape. This doesn't matter. So the best advice I could give, and you don't have to take my advice. I don't care. The fact is this, is I've grown to love what I do even more when I quit worrying about that. When I quit, you know, putting the financial side or the world's view. So what I was saying about the Phil Jackson sports psychology reference in this video was, there's two types of mentalities. There's the scoreboard mentality, and then there's now if you look at like most of the hip-hop world and things like that, and this is the truth, You know, you got guys putting thousands of dollars on a bed and taking a picture on Instagram, and that's the scoreboard mentality. That's what that is, and I don't feel ashamed for saying that. That's what it is. It's like, man, look at me, I'm making big dollars with mine, you know, or look at me, I'm in front of everybody, and I'm the man. Now, hip hop was pretty much birthed out of that for a season, where it's competitiveness, you know, it's competition. It's the same thing with football. I mean, there's certain players that are really good, so they're competitive, you know, and we may give them that limelight, but I think they focus on the other side of it, which is the mastery side of it. So a lot of guys get this fictitious view of what it is, and I know some of these artists that have been, you know, close to that level, and they're on the mastery side of it. So that's the other side. There's the scoreboard and then the mastery. The mastery is just focus on getting it in making yourself better. You know, making the track better, making the mix better, making the, you know, the vocals better, making the whatever better, and just stay in that. And then it's like all the other stuff will it's the truth, it'll handle itself. But I think it's easy to get deceived into thinking, oh, this is the way it is. You know, I got to get up there. And then you put all that pressure on yourself, and then all the joy that you had in the studio is gone. It's like miserable. You know what I mean? You're just like, man, I got to get my mixtape out. I got to do this. And it's like this do or die attitude that I see in a lot of independent new artists. And it's like, that's great to have that. It's great to have a hint of that, but not to, you know, not to get so sick and sort of lose existence because of it, because you're trying to gain the world, you know what I mean? And I'm going to be very honest, and I think this is a great way to come back to the YouTube channel, because I see this through emails. I see guys saying, Doug, could you do a deal for me? I really need to get this out, man. This is going to launch my career and all this stuff. And it's like, don't put so much stress on yourself. You know, this is and I'm going to be very truthful when I say that I believe that this is a gift from God. I think it's something He gives us, and if you read, it's something He gives us to worship Him. So that doesn't necessarily mean you got to show up in the Sunday church service to worship God. If you're you know, emotional and testimonial, and you see some of the greatest artists of all time, that was what they portrayed to people, and it was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, you would hear a song and go, man, I feel just like that guy. Like, this is great, or you know, a song that brought you to a sense of where you were at in your life. So great writers and songwriters, that's a key to what we need in society. I really believe that that's a huge thing. But when that becomes not the goal anymore, and then it becomes about, you know, how could I make a paycheck? How could I do this? How am I making this? And I know that the world portrays that to people. I know that, okay? I know that the world will lead you into that, where it's all about that. And I will tell you, and then I'll end this whole chapter, because I wanted to do this to come back. I know I've said like 6 times now, oh, I'm coming back, but then as I went back to do video, I did like all these little snippets, and I just felt like, dude, it's not the time. Like, there's so much else going on, and I couldn't dedicate myself like I did in my early years of YouTube. I was just like, dude, this is not working. I can't just give them, you know, videos on this or that. People don't want to hear some of the stuff that I was talking about. Like, it's cool, like when I'm giving you gear and tips and tricks and things like that. There's another debate in that altogether. We need to fund these schools and fund these teachers, and you know, actually take that side of it very serious. It shouldn't just be all YouTube learning, and you know, if you don't have you know, the finances available, that's a totally different subject in its own. But YouTube's a great place to learn. You know, it's a great place to say, wow, man, I really want to do this. But I would say, you know, unwrap the gift by going through the YouTube steps, but then make the steps to go further if that's what you want to do. So anyways, that was my whole spiel of just not putting the stress on. The mastery mentality, just to sum up, is to stay focused on what you can control, and that's why I always have, you know, gear coming in and out of here and things like that, because I'm very, very, very what would I put it, curious of the new sounds and understanding this or understanding that. I don't get set in my ways a lot. A lot of pieces of equipment that I bought have come through try and error. You know, I'm looking for a certain thing and I go, okay, that does it. So that's what this video is going to be about today. You know, how you get certain sounds, what this sound does, so you can maybe get an understanding of why I have what I have. And then I'm going to go through something like this. I'm going to look at this little Behringer, one of the coolest pieces of gear I've purchased in a while as far as functionality is concerned. And I had to learn it for a show we did. So I got so impressed with it, I actually bought one, and I was like, dude, I could use this for a lot of stuff. In mastering, stuff like that, it's not necessarily a mastering thing, but it can become a monitor controller for your studio. I'll show you some ADAT cards you can buy, or Dante cards, and you can actually make it like a pretty big mixer for a new studio. But to sum up, mastery means stay focused on this. Don't let the scoreboard and the money and the fame and the fortune, don't let that deter you from what you're really doing this for. And that's where the joy is. The scoreboard mentality, and like I said, as new artists, man, you can get stuck in that real quick. Especially in some of the what I would classify, what I grew up in was like hip-hop, and you know, hip-hop was pretty much it. But you can get that I need to be the man mentality, and that's okay for some of those guys, and that's what they do. You know, it can become a real prideful business. I'm not saying all of them. Okay, there's been some amazing, genuine, just I couldn't believe how they treated me hip-hop artists. So don't ever like pack just because a few things have happened to you. You're going to have to get a little bit of that weathered skin to say, he's all right, he's learning. You know what I mean? But long story short, stick to the mastery. Don't stick to the scoreboard, because the scoreboard's going to lead you to quit, you know, lose focus, not want to do this anymore. And unfortunately, it happens to a lot of people. So hopefully this is some words that'll help you, you know, going forward. So today I'm just going to go through some of my gear. This has been a total transformation in my studio. I'm going to talk about the monitors too, because there's these two monitors back here, and I'm not going to give them more glory than the ones I've already had because they're new, but they're impressive. They're these little tiny things that actually the company JBL Harman came out with, and we hooked them up, and we were like, you gotta be kidding me. I've never heard anything. So I'll talk about some of the mixing things, some of the stuff I look out for, and like mastering, stuff like that. You know, what I'm looking for in a speaker. So you'll get a lot of information, but we're gonna start from top left, and then we're gonna go down this rack and what's in my rack here. So let me zoom the camera out a little bit and talk about the first piece here. It's from Solid State Logic, and I use this a lot, and I'll even give you the tricks, man, some of the stuff we've done that really sets masters apart here. And then I'll try to move the camera again and show you some other stuff. But yeah, this has pretty much been, this works well, and it's always worked well, and I always get a great result. And you know, when somebody hits me up and goes, Doug, wow, you know, when somebody says that to me, I know we're picking the right stuff, because people were like, dude, I can't even believe my song sounded that good. That's not me. You got to tip your hat to some of these companies that have designed this equipment. So let's move this a little bit forward so you can see it a little bit better. And I'll go from left to right here, and then I'll go down the rack. So here's the first thing. Let me turn my ringer off of my phone, because it seems like people like to call me when I'm doing videos. So the first left is actually an 8-channel input. In the XRack, a lot of people go for the one with the line level. The reason being is because then you can drive that line, but I have some other ways of doing that. So I'm doing a lot of 2-track finishing stuff, and I'm going to be honest, man, something that the online digital services, like the digital online mastering services, can't do is a lot of the artists that I work with are looking to impart something that they're used to. And some of these artists, you know, have been under record labels and things like that. Now they're doing a tape where they're, you know, they have a few $100 instead of a few $1,000s for a mix. So they're going, oh, okay, well, how can we make this happen? So this is 16 channels of summing. That's SSL summing. Like I said, they do make a line level one, but this one allows me to split it out from 16 channels, actually from a antelope interface. and it's incredible what it does to the stereo field. Now summing, the benefits of summing come when you have multiple channels. You can actually get the benefit if you're really driving it hard on like a stereo channel, but you're really going to hear the image and the depth and what it does when you have multiple channels of summing. So we have 2 of these modules. It works well. I don't use the insert things because I have a patch bay and I have multiple inputs and outputs. I could use them, I could route it to it, but I just don't. I like how you can do this with summing. I can actually activate certain stems, so I can assign them in Pro Tools. And I can say, let's just hear the drum stem, and then that's soloed. So let me turn that on so you can see those lights. So yeah, if I solo this, now I'm just listening to the drum stem, and I can print stems that way too. So as I print back, I could say, let's just print the vocal stem. So I highlight that one, now that's soloed. Now if I activate all of them, that's the whole mix. Pretty cool, huh? Now you can actually do it outside the box. I mean, it keeps your attention a little bit better, and I think a really big part of this is keeping the excitement and keeping the joy of what you're doing. I really do. You know, if you go to a studio and a guy's absolutely miserable, we had a sound guy the other night, he was like falling asleep. I was like, this guy's pathetic. You know, it's like, come on, dude. That really shows class. So anyways, without bashing people, the SSL EQ, this is actually the stereo version of the SSL EQ. They made that in a 1U. They were really proud of that because that's hard to do. So you have that global control over the left and right stereo image, just like a plug-in. And that makes this very easy to use. This is one of the most powerful EQs I think you can get for tracking, mixing. You can really drive it. You look at, you know, some of the great engineers through the years. I mean, they can hit this thing hard and it still holds together. To me, that shows a really great tracking EQ. It shows a really great mixing EQ because you can get a lot of sounds out of it. So if you're going to buy one EQ and you're in the mixing world, I would highly recommend this, because it just is able to produce about anything you could possibly imagine, and it does it so well. It's not harsh, it's not brittle, it's not, you know, all the things that you would get with an EQ that's not necessarily great. This thing is probably, I don't know what else I could reach to if I really wanted to get a sound to sit in a mix. That's probably one of the most popular EQs when it comes to large format boards. Now this one, you can actually switch the curve to act like the G in the E series, and you can switch it up, which is really neat. So let's move on, because this is going to be a long video if I don't. So this is the XR728, I believe. This is the stereo dynamic module. In my studio, I just wanted to have that as a channel strip. So what's cool when we do mixes, and why I always press and tell people to do stems, is I could actually use that on a stem, print it, bring it back in, and do it in context to the mix. So I know what the mix is doing, I know what I'm trying to get, and I'm gonna do it until I achieve that, and then I can bring it back into the session, and I can go to the next track and go to the next track, and all of a sudden you have this refined, amazing sounding mix. And we can do that for a lot less. Why, if you said, well, Doug, why don't you buy a big SSL board? Well, now the mix, I have to charge you 10 times as much to do the same thing, where I'm sort of taking some of the workflow and making it mine. You know what I mean? So, you know, SSL boards with this, I would say, what are we talking, like 64 channels, maybe even 24 channels of this is upwards of $90,000. So I think we'll leave it here, because I'd have to charge you a lot more if you send a mix in through the internet. Now this is the bus compressor. I think a lot of people have this plug-in. What I hear on the SSL bus compressor is just a control that you can't get without it. It brings this refinement and this focus and this punch that you can't get without it. It has this great sound. Now I have the Duende, okay? I just upgraded to the new Duende plugins, and it sounds good, man. So if you're in the box, man, don't get discouraged, because it does sound good. I think this one adds a little bit of its own, I hate to be cliche, but its own mojo. It's got like a harmonic to it, and you can drive it a little harder because it's the hardware piece. It's not dependent on a computer. It's not dependent on the conversion. It's not dependent on a lot of things. So once you hit it, now we're talking a totally different image, which you're going to hear differences in a well-treated room with well-treated speakers. But when you have these plugins available, use them and learn them, man. If you're not at this point where you have hardware, I mean, take the time to use these. So here's one of the coolest pieces of gear I've bought. This is the master module, so it's the master off of the SSL board, and you have all these cool options. I'll say it real quick so we can move on, but there's a thing called insert sum, and I use that a lot on 2-track mastering, sum mastering, stuff like that, stem sessions. And what it's going to do is sum the two. It's going to sum the mastered version and it's going to sum the original. Now what that does, not all the time, it doesn't have to happen, but what it does is allows me to really blow that mix up beyond what you could possibly imagine it. I mean, it makes it louder, bigger, punchier, because parallel, a lot of times new mixing engineers and stuff, they're not using it as much as some of the bigger mixing guys. So I'll get to the end and I'll be like, man, this thing sounds weak. Or if you're at home and you're like, man, this is a weak sounding record, Doug, I really need your help. A lot of times people send me stuff because of that, and I can hit this and then activate this, put this on the sum, and then put this on the insert. So I have like the whole rack on the sum, have just the bus on the insert, and the marriage between those two have always worked well in here. And now your song sounds like 40 billion times bigger. And people say, how do you do that? Well, it's a little bit of everything, but this little button, if I didn't have it, would be hard. And the other thing is this, inside the box when you're trying to do parallel and stuff, if you don't have a big computer, you'll run into latency issues, and then that causes all kinds of weird things. You get these like weird anomalies in phase. You're going, man, what the heck, it lost all its power. This is definitely a much more efficient way of doing it, because you know you're not really screwing anything up, you're not changing the sound, you're not changing the tone, you're just running a parallel, so you're printing pretty much two mixes. It's really cool. So let's go down to another cool piece. This one's used a lot on the final 2 bus, is the Moog. Now I will tell you this is one of those ones that once I got it, I couldn't live without it. I'm gonna go super quick because I know the video is gonna be like 9 hours long. There's a sub knob and there is an air band. That's another piece. I don't know how you can get that without that. The way that it works is not, it's the way that it works. The curves all work different with one another. If I boost this, it changes some of the other stuff around it. 160, these are all fundamental frequencies, and I'm going to tell you why. The sub band, a lot of times the low end's not big. Okay, it's not the sub information that's not big, it's the whole entire low end, so it doesn't have any body to it. Something about the sub band, it does that. Okay, it lifts that whole entire low image, not just the sub image. It's really, really great. You hear it a lot on a lot of stuff. Okay, let's just put it that way. The 40 hertz is one of those things where if you hit that and you need a little more thud, a little more thump to the mix, you're going to get it out of the 40. 160 is a really crucial range, especially on small systems. If you have too much of it, it actually makes the whole song sound pinched. And you're like, man, my song sounds really muffled. A lot of dance, EDM, hip hop guys, they overdo that range, and what you hear is like a muffled, no punch record. So you can actually have too much 160, and it'll actually do the exact opposite of what you wanted it to do. It'll make it sound weak and sort of brittle, and no low end definition. So the big thing that screws up your low end is when you have too much in a certain frequency range and it masks the whole thing. Now that's a different story for a different day, but a lot of times it's speakers and acoustics that can help you fix that problem. So 650, this range is that range of the vocal that nobody decides to lift. It's not that bright, shiny 2.5 presence range. It's that defined, what I would call human sound. It sounds like what we sound like. I think a lot of times if you have a bright mix and it's real skinny sounding and you're going, man, it sounds good, I like it, but it just doesn't sound right. Usually 650, if you drive that a little bit, now all of a sudden that focus of that human feel comes into play. That's what I call it. I call it the human knob, 650. Now you might call it something different, but it gives it the mids. You know, the mid range is one thing, especially to new people to this. Nobody touches that. If you're sitting at home and you're like, I never touch that. I always touch 2K and 80 hertz, you know. That's a really important range if you're starting to get like the smiley face going on. A lot of times in mastering, man, I'll drive this thing like 5 dBs, you know. It's like, holy smokes, let's get it in the ballpark. So yeah, it's really, really a powerful tool, the EQ. This is probably one of the best investments below, this Portico. This thing, if you were going to start a mastering studio, or you wanted to get a nice 2-bus, and now I know SSL came out with one, so I'm gonna be very frank about this. But this piece is incredible. Let me turn it on for a minute, and I'll go from left to right. There's a gain knob. So the gain knob on this is probably the most accurate, transparent, adds its own little mojo, always good, sounds great. I try to gain somebody's song or give it level with this box if I can, even if it's not even hitting the compressor. I don't really care if it does, because what this adds is that sound we all have grown to love through the years. It's got an analog sound, but it's not overbearing. It's not going to change your whole entire record. Every time I put it on something, it sounds great. Now this has feed forward and feed backward mode. It has RMS and peak detection for the actual limiting. For the compression. And I think it might be the limiting, actually. I'm gonna have to double check that, but I think the limiter is pretty much in conjunction with the compressor. So you have your attack and your release, and then this can become your main. Okay, so you see this, it's just duplicated here, but this can be duplicated so you can use one side just to control the stereo image. So don't get what I would say a little bit complexed and say, man, this is a lot of knobs. It's not. You can actually just use it as a stereo compressor. You can have the side chain here, which will allow 125 and down to go through without hitting the compressor. You actually have a side chain insert if you wanted to insert something to trigger the thing off of the Portico. That's something, I'm going to be honest, I like doing in the box. But if it was a mastering situation, I could feed an EQ to it to get a different image. I remember I had a Chameleon, what was that thing, a 7320 or something like that, and it was known for its high pass because it had this really unique way of switching that, and I actually side chained it to this for one project, and it really worked well. So the compressor took on a whole different way that it was working. You have a silk and a red knob. These two are classic now on this Portico line, but the silk knob is going to add that mid-range. Let's say you get to the end of the mix and you're like, man, my vocals are just a little bit, they're not lively, you know, I don't like them. You'd put the red knob in, and here's your adjustment, so you can add some, you can get some, and it's harmonics. And then you have the blue knob, which is more of a low-end fill-in, like I was talking about with the sub knob on the Mog. So between that combo and you got a really skinny mix, it can work wonders to that mix. So that's that. The limiter is probably the most transparent limiter I've ever heard in my life. If you weren't, like I said, if you were in your room, you might think it was broke. If you're not like really in a super accurate room, you might think that limiter's broke. And that's the goal. We want it to limit the signal, but we don't want it to change the source. You know what I mean? We don't want it to change what you had. We want to make it louder to the point where somebody goes, man, how did he do that? That's insane. And that's a box that you can do this with. So really quick, to keep moving on, you have your width and your depth. Now you can take these two sections and hit this SFE to compressor, and now you're mid-siding, okay? Which is so neat, dude. I mean, I don't know how many boxes, and I know I'm not getting super, you know, super awesome camera shots on this stuff. I'm just trying to give you the rundown. So you have your depth, you have your width. Now watch this. So now the left becomes the depth, the right becomes the width. Now you have a mid-side processor just by activating this. Now with that mode, you want to unlink the master. Now you have this and this. The gain changes a little bit by doing this. I believe the gain comes over here now. I haven't done that in a while. I've been using this thing over here we'll talk about. But between this combo and you have a really, really poor quality mix going on the sides, you could do some serious surgery with these two things. You could do some serious surgery with just this. So yeah, if you're looking for an all-in-one box, this is probably the one if you're trying to understand and have the tools necessary to do things in mastering and get great results, this is it. Another thing on here, there's a parallel knob. I mean, you're blending the original with the processed by just using this knob here. I mean, congrats to these guys, man. I cannot believe what this box does. Every day I wake up, I go, you know, what in the heck just happened? Like I did I'm going to tell you this and then I'll move on, but I did a project, and it was a guy that was shopping this to record labels, and I had the dynamics, the reduction of this so hit, because that's what he wanted. That was what he was shooting for. And he told me at the end of it, he goes, dude, you're the only engineer that made that happen. He goes, I've never heard it. I didn't, because it was almost like I didn't want to do it. I mean, I had 20-something dBs of gain reduction, and this thing could handle it, and it was the only piece that could do it. There was not one other piece in the studio that could do that, and that's impressive. So let's go to the top of the other side, and then we'll finish it off. And I might have to split this into 2 videos because it's getting into 30 minutes here. And let me unhook this from the power, and then we'll try to upload this to YouTube and keep them rocking, man. I know I keep saying that, but this is the truth this time. Stuff gets busy, guys. I think you understand. So this is one of those purchases I made. I was a little hesitant because it's a lot of money. Let me put it that way. I was like, oh boy, this is a lot of money. But I bought these Neve 1073s. Now a lot of people buy these as preamps in the preamp in the lunchbox isn't that bad. I mean, you got, you know, $1,000 a piece, so you're $2,000 in a lunchbox. You can get 2 awesome preamps for that. So that's actually a really good deal. I've used those on more stem sessions than I can possibly imagine. So when somebody sends me their stems, I will literally use that. That's why I have 2 of them. But I will use that box and re-record. So I'll set it up for myself to mix, and then I'll go through this other process. And that's what you're paying for. And so it'll be like pretty much tracking with a Neve. Like on the Neve 1073, there's a line level. There's a line amp on this side. There's a mic pre on this side, so when you're in this, you can actually gain the line level, just like I was saying with the summing box. I did purchase the Portico summing box for some time. It was unbelievable, and it was absolutely incredible. But in my case, it was a workflow thing. I was like, man, I'm not going to be able to do this. I do stem sessions, and I want to print the stems back so you can have them in a later day if you wanted to, you know, take over. So that's why I stress our stem service, because you'll get a final product, you'll get a finished, but you'll also get the stems that made that finished, and then you can say, oh, okay, you know what, Doug, we're going to remix this, or we're going to add to this next year, or we're going to always have that. So I thought, you know, that's a very important part of work. I mean, working in this business, you got to be able to go backwards. So this is the EQ. This is the 1073 EQ. You can see the Shep 73. That's the actual ones for the 500 series. And this is the 2264. I'll be brief here. Those are probably the best tracking compressors I have, I would say. That and that SSL. It's a little more aggressive, okay? It's not a mastering compressor. A lot of people ask me that question on YouTube. They're like, what should I buy? And then they buy a mastering compressor and they're depressed. They're like, dude, this doesn't do anything. Because it does do a lot, but it's you're trying to get something really, really aggressive, like an SSL compressor or a Neve 2264 pair, and those link together so you can use those on buses. So between the dynamic module from SSL and the dynamic modules from Neve, I think we have that pretty much covered for you guys if you want to send your music. It's incredible what it does. And then the other studio that I work out of, with his name's Freddie DeMarco, he has a pair of Vox boxes. He has the 1176 pairs. He has the 2A pairs. He has the API EQs. So whatever's going to be perfect for the project, we pride ourselves in making sure that you get that sound. And it took a lot to get here, so we're really excited about it. So the Manly New Mew, Freddie has the Very Mew. That's why I don't have one anymore. You know, we started working together, myself and him, and we've done some amazing things. So the Manly New Mew is a modern transient punch with that manly front end that we're all also accustomed to. So this, just what I would classify this as a manly with extreme transient punch. So if you're out there wondering what that does, you just figured it out. It has this thing called the hip feature. Now, it's like a parallel thing. I don't know how it works, but it's like these companies are getting it, and they've understood it before we have, that there's something going on with the low mids of these sounds, man. We got to bring them forward and give it that body and give it that definition on a small system. And that's what they did with that, when I think about that hip feature on there. It also has a side chain. And it has a link mode, it has an on-link mode, it has compress and limit, it's got vacuum tubes in it, and it has a solid-state back end, I believe, so the output's something to hear. I'm going to tell you, I didn't, at first I was like, oh, it's okay, and then, man, I kept using it, and it always made the master sound better. So, yeah, when you buy a piece of gear like that, like the Manley, you're going to have a problem, man. Like, if you've never used compressors, you'll be like, dude, this thing's, like, great and all, but it's not really that vibey, because it's not meant to be like that. It's not meant to crush the snot out of everything. Now, that thing can do that. It's great on a drum bus, things like that. But when you're using it in, like, a two-bus way, it isn't about that. It's about making that track louder by compression control and giving it an overall tone. You know, the new Mew gives it this, like, atmospheric tone. I don't know how to describe Manley's sound, but Manley has this, like, I want to listen to more sound, and all the pieces in this rack give you that. So that's another thing when picking and choosing gear. You know, you're looking for tone, you're looking for a sound that you really love. So let's move on almost to the end, guys, but man, you heard about everything in this studio pretty much. The Crane Song. The Crane Song is an older piece. I used to have the Dave Hill. I've had so much gear in and out of here, but I had the Dave Hill Titans. And I was like, you know what, at the time, they're a very good deal for what they do, but it was, at that time, I wanted to trade off and get something different. And it sort of just worked out that I was looking for something with a little bit more mojo, a little more vibe, but I always loved Crane Song, and here's what I use this for. So you guys are going to get a really huge trick. I use this when a bass heavy mix is in play, where somebody's like, man, I want the bass, I want the bass. This thing, for some reason, I don't know of any other compressor that can make bass sound so good. I'm talking low sub bass. I mean, because I don't really hit compression that hard on a bass like that. But the Who used it on their tour, I believe. No, it was one of the bigger bands. I think it was the Who. It's in their rack on their bass guitar. The thing is this thing really has that epic sound to it if you use it right. I'm not a big fan of it when you hit it hard. Okay, it's really, really, really good at what it does, but it can really flatten the image pretty quick. This is not what it was meant to do. Now with a bass though, there's actually these little harmonic and all this stuff, his settings, Dave Hill's settings. But I think B stands for bass. I think it does. I mean, that's just logic, right? But man, there's 4 different presets of that, and just using that, I mean, it's like, blows my mind. It compresses bass in a way, in a mastering way. It's not a DBX 160, okay? It's not a, you get what I'm saying? It's a global control on the image of the low end, and it just makes, it seems like it lets the speakers reproduce the image better. It's the only way I can describe what that does. So we'll move on. It's got 2 different modes. It's got stereo link. It's got gain left, gain right, attack, release, shape. So that's harmonics. It's got harmonics built in, threshold, and this is an older piece, but it's still relevant. Trust me. So this, we'll move on to this. I'll turn this on real quick. What a cool piece of gear. Now here's the problem. Technology hasn't sped up, but this is USB controlled. I can go on the screen. Let me see if I can do this real quick. And you heard this one on like The Greatest Showman. I think they use this on the master. I could hear it on the movie. It's got a pristine, it has a distinct sound to it. Let's put it this way. So like if I open up Wavelab on my computer here, I'll show you. This thing can actually go into midside processing. And for some reason I can't figure out how to do it without the software, but it's probably easy and I just haven't figured that out yet. But what the Better Maker can do is, I would say hands down, how do I describe the Better Maker? So here we go. Let's look at the screen. This should actually click it back to normal. You see how that did that? So when I open up my Pro Tools session, I can assign that EQ to that session. So when I open that session up, it's gonna actually revisit the settings. So what a cool thing, man. So let me get past this big patch bay of cables. Those are all Megami cables, by the way. Cables do matter when we're talking about stuff like this. I mean, get something good. So check this out. So now you have a high pass. If you look at the top left knobs, high pass, filter in, EQ1 in, EQ2 in, PEQ in. So let me go through this. So if you guys are out there on the Better Maker, you know, trying to get some stuff and you know what this is a really accurate, amazing sounding equalizer, and it's a very versatile Swiss Army kind of equalizer. Number one, here's your high pass filter. Now I can set that to either work as mid, side, or I can just make it, you know, work as a stereo device. So you're like, man, I don't know about all this mid-side stuff, so you just leave that alone. These two knobs are actually just a basic parametric, paragraphic, you know, kind of layout. It's paragraphic, but you're looking at this as your gain and your reduction. And I'm trying to think about how to explain how it sounds. It's really good at it. So the best way for me to describe this is if I get a mix in and I notice that the drums sound awesome, you know, at 170, 180, they're punching, they sound good, but they're just a little too loud. Certain EQs are capable of taking that down without you hearing it or not affecting the way that it sounded. That's a great EQ to me in the mastering world. It doesn't affect the actual punch. It doesn't affect the way that drum sounded in that frequency range. It just turned it down, and now everything else comes forward where you can enjoy that as a listener as well. So now you're hearing the top of the snare and you're hearing all this stuff. It's not pinched anymore. This EQ has a way of actually changing the bandwidth with these buttons here. As you notice, that's low, that's all the way out. So you can actually change the bandwidth and you can listen. Now here's the frequency. What's really neat about this is you can see what frequency you're on. Let me try to get over here. I apologize, guys. This is like insane. I can't change the patch bay because we have a project going on. But if I change this, that's telling me what frequency it is. So we're at 999. The second one goes all the way up to 15K. And those are two powerful EQs. It's one of those ones where I could sit here and tell you all day, and we'll try to do a video on it. I think I did do a video on it. But it's really good at its job for mastering. I'm not changing it. I'm not adding my own vibe. I'm not doing this. And that's on professional projects. I go, well, you don't want me to change it. You don't want me to add my own vibe. I get it. So let's just control this thing and make it better. Now, the last thing on this is the PEQ. And I know these cables are in the way. I would move them if I could. But the PEQ is a Pultec. If you're going to buy a part of this and you don't have money for this whole thing, I would buy the Pultec. It is absolutely incredible how that sounds. When you boost on a Pultec, it's like a boost and cut kind of thing. It's an attenuate. So I'm boosting 100, I'm attenuating 100. So I'm attenuating around it, so I'm getting a better curve for the low end. And that is a lifesaver on a lot of projects that I've done. I mean, the low end sounds weak and muffled, and it's just like the bass isn't translating well. That Pultec, just using it, it's the most musical Pultec I've ever heard for a mastering device. It's not an EQP, you know, with vintage vacuum tubes, and it's giving this silky butter sound. No, this thing just like literally takes that bass, and the best words to describe is it puts it in the mix well. Now, if you don't know what you're doing, it doesn't. You know, you can still screw it up. So all this stuff you can still screw up. So this happens on the high end as well. There's a Pultec on the high end. Here's your frequency points: 3K, 4K, 5K, 8K, 10K, 12K, and 16K. You can pick what you want, and you can really change a mix for the better and get it to sit even. So attenuation and boosting on a Pultec on the top and the bottom of a song is absolutely incredible for balancing and getting it to sit well with the mids. So between the combo of this and, you know, the 650 knob on this, I mean, you can get a song to sound absolutely wonderful. So those two EQs are pretty much the ones that I just said, dude, that's what I need. And those always have worked for me. Now please don't go out and say, oh, I'm going to buy an EQ4 in a Better Maker. There's so many different EQs. There's Chandler, there's Mazalik, there's GML, there's, you know, all these. But this has just worked in my workflow. So with last but not least, in the hardware version, you have a Pure 2 10M. That combo right there, I know a few guys that travel with it. They just have a Pure 2 and a 10M, and they show up within the box, and they master your record right there. And I'm going to tell you, that combo alone is I don't even know how to describe it. The 10M adds a accuracy to the clock that you cannot, until you hear it, you cannot put it in words. It's like you're sitting in the room with the actual thing that happened. And I think what I meant by that is, like, I was watching a movie with I think it was Batman versus Superman, and Batman throws Superman through the wall, or vice versa. And I hope one of the comic guys don't. No, man, it was Superman threw Batman through the wall, dude. No, it was just so incredible. I thought like my drywall in the studio fell down when I had the 10M on. I took the 10M off. It still sounded lifelike and great, but it was like, dude, are you kidding me? So it lets you, as a mixing engineer or a mastering engineer, understand what the image is, and it's like you're putting a huge benefit in your favor. You're putting the ball in your court where you can, like, really hear the reverbs. You can really hear the high end. And the great news is it prints. So your listeners hear it as well. And once it prints, yeah, now we're at the mercy of some of the converters on this planet that aren't that good, but you're still translating a much bigger image, a much better image. So people say that too. It doesn't matter. Everybody converts it down to MP3 anyways. I can make an MP3 sound like a DVD, like I really can, but then, you know, it's in your hands once it gets converted, and you're putting in all these formats and these new websites and all this stuff, then it's in your hands, and I have nothing I can do about that. So those two, a great marriage. Up top's an old Digi 192, and that runs to this. Almost there, fellas, almost there. So if you look over here, that Digi 192 is pretty much, I was learning how to incorporate something like a digital mixer for your guys' sake, honestly, and for my own sake, because I wanted to learn this for churches, for places, you know, places that need these Behringers or these Midas boards, stuff like that. And the Digi 192, it runs fiber optic out, and that will go fiber optic in to this X32. Now what's cool about that allows me to clock the X32 from this. So it's a totally different X32. We'll do that in a different video. That's going to take days to explain. If I you know, try to put it in this video, we're going to be like 4 hours long. So this combo can actually pretty much become the clock, the main time code, the main sync. To you new guys out there, a great clock and a great converter is pretty much the key to the digital world. It really does come down to that as far as what you're going to get. And I would highly recommend, because I've stressed that millions of times on my YouTube channel, I'd highly recommend take that serious. Take that very serious. So this thing, so what I can do in this room, which is really neat, man, is I can take and we'll end with this. Actually, I'll end with the monitors, so you've seen about everything in here. So I can take this. Now this says JBL Pair, B Room, Aventone. So I have my Aventone up, B Room up. So it's actually this page. So there's the JBLs. You can link them. B Room, Aventone, B Room, JBL Pair, and then the Focals are just running direct. That's the mastering pair. There's no coloration, no nothing. Now, with that being said, what's so cool about this is this thing can feed the aux feeding. So I'm feeding the board. What you could do if you wanted to buy one of these for your own studio and really, really upgrade your sound is you can use this almost like a real-time analyzer, and you can EQ your room with this thing. I mean, if I go to the equalizer on the stereo bus, check this out. Let's go to view. Oh, that's not, there's the EQ. I can go on screen. I know I'm not zoomed in, I apologize. But I can go on screen and actually EQ my room to sound better. This is just one thing you can do. Another thing you can do is now this can become my inputs and outputs from the Digi 192. They're all digital. I'm not going to the analog world. I'm not going back and forth and stuff like that. I'm gonna have to do a totally different video on this just to show you this. And one more thing that it does is it becomes a controller for Pro Tools. So if I open up Pro Tools, let's see if I can do that real quick. You guys are getting the rundown, man. I just caught up for the last year on what the heck's going on in here. So let me try to load this Pro Tools session, but now in the left corner here, there's a thing called remote. So there's DAW remote. So I can take the DAW remote and I can say, well, I wanna run my Pro Tools session. I don't really care about using it for the mix. Like if I was doing a stem session, I'm not gonna be using this. I might, you know, catch maybe a few effects and reverbs, but man, if I was starting a studio and I wanted to learn signal flow and routing and really learn something valuable, I would definitely consider buying one of these. Because it's going to show you everything. You got to understand buses, you got to understand inputs and outputs, preamps, and it looks pretty cool. You know, people used to say Behringer totally redeemed themselves, man, in my mind, because I never had a piece of equipment that I know of that ever sounded that good. So if I open up this Pro Tools session, check this out. This is a master I did yesterday. If I hit DAW remote, watch what happens. There's only 2 channels in the session, and now there they are. Now if I go to matrix view, I can actually go back out of DAW remote, go to matrix view. Here's my B room. Go back into DAW remote. I know I'm doing this a little fast, and I can hit play, and there it is. So if my speakers were on, we'd be hearing it. But isn't that cool? I mean, how cool is that? So you can do all this from this controller. I mean, what an amazing thing. And considering a lot of little, you know, controllers I bought in the past for $600-700, I mean, this is a no-brainer. If you're even in the market for a controller, it might not be the greatest and the biggest and the most integrated, but I'm going to tell you what, every controller I've ever bought, I find myself just using it for basic stuff, like, you know, volume, things like that, playback, things like this, rewind, stuff like that. It's an incredible thing. Also on this thing, let me show you real quick. I'll have to show you in the other room because it's over there. But it's all integrated through an iPad. I mean, so let's talk about the speakers. Then I got to roll, dude. This is about an hour long. Hopefully you guys had some fun, man, and learned something. So here's my monitors, and we'll end the video. So it'll be almost exactly an hour. So we have the Focal Trios. The Focal Trios are an incredible monitor. They can flip into 2-way mode with a foot switch, so then it just becomes this speaker. Now, this is becoming very important, so follow me, the reason that we just bought these JBLs. The small system is becoming sort of a standard today. And I would say the smaller systems, the Sonos systems, the Harman systems that you can get at, you know, whatever retail store, I'm telling you, those are becoming super popular. Now, Focal did something where they would say, okay, we're going to kick the 8, it's going to go over to this 2-way system so you can hear it like an NS10. NS10s are still popular. It translates. The thing with an NS10 to me, I sort of got, you know, it's fatiguing. The NS10 is a fatiguing speaker, and a mastering speaker, it's not. It doesn't go down to 40 hertz. It doesn't go down to 20 hertz. It doesn't even go, I think it goes to like 80-something hertz. So the thing is, it's not a mastering speaker. It lets you really focus on the mids and all the good stuff in a song. That's why an NS10 is really popular and it's super flat. It doesn't have a long throw. It can sit in the room well. I'm not going to, you know, pretend like I'm a super speaker professional, but I know what I've used them for a long time. You can see in my old videos. The Focal was like that, but then hi-fi. I was like, wow, man, I can hear everything. But you got to have a great room. I promise you, don't go buying a huge freaking speaker like this and not having a place to put it, because you'll be disappointed. The bigger the speaker, the poorer the room, the worse the sound. You're not going to get a bass image. Now, if you get the bass image working on these in your room, you will be blown away. These are absolutely phenomenal speakers. Focal, I tip my hat to you. They've treated me like a king when I had issues with this. The guy sent me another speaker. He helped me out. There was a little dent that came from shipping. They sent me a new one. They treated me like a king. So hats off to them, and I appreciate it. JBL. I bought this speaker and I was chuckling when I took it out of the box. I was like, you kidding me, dude? That thing's tiny. It can't sound that good. I've had speakers this small and they've never sounded anything close to what this speaker does. My friend and myself sat here in front of these speakers in a hi-fi situation and I was blown away. What I love about these speakers is it reproduces the range that is the hardest to hear, and that's that low punchy range. It is so defined and so warm and so imaged in that range that you, as an engineer, I can hear compressors so accurately on these JBLs. It's scary. I mean, it literally is scary. Those speakers, if I was you, and you have very limited space, I would highly recommend these speakers. I would highly recommend these. These are the JBL 705P. They're still a little pricey, don't get me wrong, but man, I was blown away because I can take those with me. You know what I mean? I could take those in the 10M and the Pure 2 with me, and now I have a mobile rig. So unbelievable. Just wanted to share that with you. So let's move to the second room and I'm done. So if you look at my studio, this is, I got Windex up here. I was trying to clean a little bit, but that's the first room. I have this AC because we're putting in a new AC next year, so we had to worry about that. Here's my coffee, so I got to drink some of this real quick. Down there is the Lamborghini yellow M audio that makes the cut every day. What a cool investment that was, man. That thing's come in handy as a MIDI controller, a MIDI interface, all kinds of stuff. So now we'll walk out here, and this is the second room. Now this is all soundproof here, all the way down this hallway. Not sound, it's sound absorption proofed, so it's no reflections. It's not totally sound dampened. You can hear the guy next door smacking something around. So here's the second room. Now this room's equipped with some speakers that are absolutely incredible, man. I don't know how else to describe that. Now this room is not as aesthetic, but man, I had a mastering job yesterday, and the guy's like, "You kidding me, dude?" He couldn't believe it. So check this out. So this is a room you come into. So it's a hi-fi room. I mean, it really is. It's got some ugly lighting going on right now, but that's okay. So we have some keyboards. There's a gentleman coming over tomorrow that's going to do MIDI keyboards. He's going to trigger it with these. They're actually his keyboards. These speakers are actually not my speakers. It's a long story, but a gentleman, I mean, God bless him. He actually passed away, and I'm not going to get into it because that's not right. But long story short, I'm looking to try to help sell these. Okay. And in the process, man, what an honor to be able to listen to this stuff. This is a setup where you have it's a hi-fi setup with a Mod Right KWA 150 Signature Edition amplifier, and these speakers are so realistic that this is the best thing that I could possibly imagine to translate your mix and make sure it's going to sound great. This is not something that I would start that on because you could get really overwhelmed, man, because it's so good. But this is what a lot of mastering houses have. So our second room in here has been very fortunate and blessed to have these here because, and for anybody that sends us music, it's incredible what these speakers sound like. And if you're a hi-fi guy, you probably know what they are. They are so good at what they do. Now, there's other ones out there. There's Focal. There's all kinds of stuff. But these ones just seem to translate well in this room. If you listen to this room, watch this. I was telling him yesterday, I said, this room is so dead. Now, like I said, the guy over there is, making noise. But this is a perfect mixing room. Check it out. Yeah, he's doing something over there. That's the only problem, He's a good guy, I'm just saying. So yeah, we'll have this room lit up like this, and this is what I was talking about. So I'd have the mix going. I'll show up here. This is what I was talking about for Behringer's sake. I'll show up on this. I'll point the camera away as I put my password in, just in case you steal this thing. It's like somebody's gonna steal it. I'll hit connect. Check this out. So I'm like, what's up now? Boom, son. there it is. So now this is the B room. Now I'm using this. I can walk over here, you know, if you're in the area and you're trying to get some mastering done. I can walk over here and turn it on these, you know, halfway through a song and go, dude, it's not really translating up top there. But most of the time it's just that we get it done in that studio over there, and then we can sit back and listen to your record in here. It's an incredible way to do music, man, and it's an incredible way to rest assured that it sounds good on all this stuff. The JBLs really translate well to the new modern systems. The Focals in two-way mode to the modern systems. The Focals in three-way mode to the bigger, more broad systems. These, more theatrical, bigger image. You know if it's translating on these things, it's definitely translating on about everything. So, because that's why they buy them. They're pristine. So my name's Doug Jenkins. I'm going to turn this around. I thank every last one of you for putting up with me, like going in and out, in and out, in and out, in and out. You know, I had one guy, he's like, what the heck, man? This guy says he's coming back, and then he don't come back. I mean, I'm done. I'm unsubscribing. Look, I do this out of the kindness of my heart. I appreciate everybody that watches this channel. And now I have a lot of stuff to talk about. I just needed the time to talk about it. So I'm Doug Jenkins, still imixandmaster.com with the letter N. And that's that. So if you want to send us some stuff to mix, that's the best way, you know, to really get to understand what I'm all about and what I do, and you know what the studio's all about. So we'll talk to you soon. We'll see you. Boom, son.